Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Eliza, requesting this live performance of Enter Part 4 by Fire Orchestra. I suggested this for Jazz Week, but it didn't quite make it, so I'll throw it in here. So that's what we're going to be diving into today, which is pretty awesome. We had a lot of really great suggestions for Jazz Week, and as with any theme, we can only get around to 5 of them, which is a bit unfortunate, but that's just the restraints of time. If only we could get through 30 reactions a week. So let's dive into this, see what's going on with the Fire Orchestra, the track Enter, Part 4.
It's a living organism.
Now it's really quiet. We're about 20, 30 dB under our cap, under our highest volume. So interesting, we're just the vocals on the rhythm section right now. Very cool. Alright, passing a single idea around. Alright, bringing everybody in. It's building to something, but I can't envision where it's going. There we got a slight variation with the call and response now. We got a noisy texture in the back. Curious. Our conductor's got a saxophone, but I haven't seen him use it. Interesting note there. Huh. I said I had no idea where they were taking it. They were building towards something, but what? And I can't say I ever imagined it was going to be experimental noise. I think it works, don't get me wrong. But there was a switch that got flipped halfway through that track. And it got turned into a different kind of music than they started with and were leading towards. So I have I'm just trying to uh, figure out what I heard and put it into words and kind of craft a little. I'm stalling for time right now. I really am. Um, let's see. Let's see if I can do that. I'm gonna talk and let my brain figure things out at the same time, and we're gonna see if we can't just start going somewhere. The song is highly dynamic, and I think that's one of the key aspects to it. There really is two elements I think that um, make the song what it is. And we'll get to the next one in a moment, and that is layers and the structure of the layers. But I think dynamics are a really interesting aspect here as well. And I think it's what I want to talk about first. Volume dynamics. Like, you can't ignore that. There's a good, man, 20, 25, maybe 30 dB difference between our highest point and our lowest point volume wise. And it does make it a little difficult for me to balance it because I want to give you guys the full range of the volume. The dynamics are a core element of that. But what do I do when it's that big of a difference? How do I know if you're going to be able to hear the quiet parts? How do I make sure that I'm speaking quiet enough that if you have the volume turned up, I'm not going to blow your ears out when I make a comment? So that's always a fun game to play, as setting up the video and all that. Um, but it's a fascinating part of this track because it isn't just a slow burn. I mean, it is, but it's not just a slow burn. Like with any good work of art, it has peaks and valleys. A single slow burn can be interesting. It could be a good song, but is it going to be a great song? I think there are very few cases with completely linear music that it is just phenomenal. For my tastes, I prefer peaks and valleys. I prefer to have moments of excess and moments of unexcess. What is the opposite of excess? Why can't I think of that word? Limits? Um, and this song does it very well. We have these little peaks and valleys at the beginning as we are introducing all the different instruments, which I thought was very cool. We'll talk about that in the structure. Then we also have on the larger scale our slow burn before we hit our first peak. And we bring it back down, we reset, and we go for another peak. This one, I don't know if it's higher than our last one. And that's kind of an interesting thing too. Again, we'll talk about it in the structure. But just the sheer ideas of volume dynamics, but it's not the only thing that's dynamic in here. We have width dynamics. There are a varying amount of people performing at any given time to where the song grows and shrinks in size, not just in volume. We have moments where we have our opening is just a jazz rhythm section. We have a drum kit, we have a bass, I think it's the upright bass, we have a pianist, and then we bring in a vocalist. Now, that vocalist trades lines, but it's still just one vocalist on top of all that for a while. Then we bring in multiple vocalists. Then we bring in some trombones. I think they came in first. And then they trade off. So we have one instrument alongside the vocals, alongside our rhythm section. And so we have this growth, this steady growth of the number of instruments. But then we also walk it back. We take the vocalists away. We go on to this single instrumental idea, and then we eventually add more of the instruments. We have all three sections playing simultaneously on top of the rhythm section. We bring the vocalists back in, we add more drum kits, we add more pianists, we add more bass and guitars. We really widen this out. Now, the volume does go alongside this, but I don't think it's particularly because of the number of instruments we have. One of the really cool things that you develop when you are in a larger orchestration like this is the ability to keep a volume regardless of the number of people in your group. So even though all the trumpets are playing, their combined volume still needs to be the same as what one trumpet was doing at the beginning, right? And there's lots of different tricks to deal with this. I've talked about in the past, like volume is not just air pressure. You can have good consistent air pressure without an increase in volume. So like there's a lot of ways to do that, and then there's also like little cheats where like some people just don't play if you're really going for quiet sections. Um, but yeah, just because more people in the trumpets are playing, more people in the trombone section, more drums are playing, doesn't mean it's louder. It just means there's more sound. It could make it fuller, or in the case of the drum kit, it could introduce more timbres, which is one of the cool things that I thought here is that we had three people on drum kits, but they seem to have different roles and different instruments around them. Like one, despite being at a drum kit, kind of had an auxiliary percussion role, in that they didn't really play the snare and the core cymbals. They sort of played these wood blocks, I think, on one of them. They just had a lot of really neat stuff around their kit. It makes me interested in what else they did during this performance because there's no point putting a full kit in front of somebody who is going to be hunched over the snare drum in order to play the stuff behind it. um, but yeah, so you can get sonic variety, harmonies, like there's all sorts of ways to widen a sound without making it louder. But as we did get louder, we also introduced more instruments, so they went hand in hand in a lot of ways as well. Um, what was another dynamic aspect? Well, I mean, I guess it's going to kind of segue into the structural element, but just the sheer variety of timbres was dynamic. We could hear a single line, a single melodic element pass through three or four different timbres. And that was always cool when the vocalists traded off lines, or when the saxes gave their thing to the trombones, gave their thing to the trumpets, and we got to hear this one idea across several sounds. Just an overall timbre variety that was really nice. And then, of course, once we thought we heard everything in the bands, the conductor comes out with his alto sax and starts squealing, adding both another timbre, I think. I saw Barry saxes in the back. I saw a tenor sax. I don't remember if I saw an alto sax. Um, so it might have been a brand new instrument, and then a brand new texture, getting those squeals out of it rather than the the standard honks. I don't know why that's the sound, the onomatopoeia I make for the saxophone sound, but it's a honk. I don't know if anybody agrees with me or not. That's what the saxophone reminds me of. Anyways, so yeah, just a lot of sonic variety there in instrumentation. Now we also had variety in the structure itself. It feels like we have a slow burn into a dip into the same slow burn, but that's not quite accurate. There's a lot of variety going on here on the micro level that, at least to me, isn't just a A. Is that what we could call it? There are a lot of similarities here between the sections, but they're not 100% identical. And in that case, I kind of see it as like A, B, C, D would be our peak, and we come back down to an A variation and a B variation into a C variation. And so it feels wholly linear because of that, but also has nice feedback, or sorry, not feedback, callback to elements we already heard, and makes it feel both linear and cyclical simultaneously, which is just so good. And that combination there, I think, is really what keeps the song feeling strong for me, even towards the end. Is that there's a familiar unfamiliarity? Is that a phrase that we can speak about it? Where after our first big moment, we bring it down and we kind of build everything back up. You're like, okay, I see where this is going. I got a feel for this now. Oh, okay, I remember that. Oh, well, that's kind of new. And now you're back onto that mode. Well, what's going to happen next? See, the thing about cycles is that you begin to feel comfortable with them. When you hit a verse, chorus, and that second chorus kicks in, you're like, okay. You hit your bridge, you hit the chorus again, you're like, yeah, I know where we're going. If after this third chorus the song doesn't end and it flips, well, now you're curious again. What's coming next? And that's usually what the bridge's job is in a standard structure. It's to introduce that curiosity after you've dealt with this mini cycle of verse, chorus, and you're becoming more comfortable with the track. So there is this moment. We hit the peak, we bring it back down, we start to build off of the same ideas. Similar ideas in the rhythm section. We got the vocals on top of that. Oh, yeah, that's kind of familiar. We're putting the saxophones behind it. I kind of remember this as well. The piano line sounds familiar, right? So you're like, okay, I see where this is going. But the song doesn't want you to feel too familiar. It wants to keep your curiosity up. And that's where they introduce the variations. Oh, I don't remember that. Well, that's kind of neat. And that's new. So now you got this mix of familiar and unfamiliar coming together to really sell our final, what, like 2 minutes here? 3 minutes on our final section. That, it really, like I said, it brings the whole song together for me. It loops the story in, but keeps me interested in what's going on. And that's always the best way to do a loop. At least for me, unless your song is about, the inevitability of cycles and the comfort of it, then yeah, you don't want to put curiosity back into your repetition. But yeah, it works so well here at keeping me interested. Now I had mentioned a switch being flipped. This I said in the middle, but I misspoke. It actually happens twice. It is at our bombastic sections, the loudest moments. It kind of went halfway on our first time around, but it definitely went full swing on our second time. Everything up to that point is based on consonants. The rhythmic elements dance around each other and have a perfectly orchestrated uh, movement to where notes are never stepping on each other's feet. There's always room for every note that wants to come out. It feels very purposeful. The same can be said about melodies, harmonies, chordal structures, just general sound. Everything has a very specific place, and that place is not competing with anything else. This is clearly seen at the beginning when we're trading off lines between different roles, whether it's the vocalists trading off or the trombones giving their line to the trumpets, so that we can still hear this sound, but we don't have to worry about the trumpets and the trombones fighting over the space, or maybe there's counterpoint and they're fighting over the spotlight. Everything is meticulously placed to where it fits perfectly in a simplified structure, a vertical structure of foundation, texture, and melody of lead elements. As we begin to introduce more and more instruments and we build the volume up, we begin to introduce dissonance. Not just necessarily harmonically, where the notes are dissonant, but rhythmically and sonically as well. There becomes an increasing disregard for every note having its place in the sound sphere, in the time, in anything. Honestly, there's so many elements stepping on each other's toes. There's just random hits that sometimes that feel uh, out of place against what someone else is doing. And then, of course, once we get to our peak and our conductor pulls out his saxophone and just starts squealing, it's just a cacophony. There is no more semblance of time, there's no more semblance of harmony, of chord structure. Every instrument is fighting to be heard in a vast sea of sound. This is that switch. We went from something very meticulously placed. And that's not to say that this chaotic section isn't notated and performed exactly the same every night, but that the end result would be fairly indistinguishable from whatever these people wanted to do. If you know, if just the notation was play loud and fast, and then just like whatever you however you want to interpret that, right? So I'm not saying that this is completely uncontrolled. It sounds like it to my ears, but it could be played this exact same way every performance. But the end result is that it feels chaotic. It feels that like there is no more of a guiding hand, slowly carving out space for other melodies to fit in. It's just tossing everything in the sink, and whatever disaster that ends up being, well, that's how these things are fitting in the sink. I don't know where I came to that metaphor. Um, and so it's kind of like nachos. I don't know why I use food so much on this channel. It's kind of like nachos, where you just kind of throw the chips into the bin, and then you throw your protein on, and you throw your cheese on, and your toppings. You're not particularly placing anything, but you still want a specific concept. You still want layers of chips toppings, right? And you have a general idea of where things are going, but it's chaotic. You know, wherever you throw it and it lands, it's pretty much where it's going. It's not like you're picking this. Oh, I want this on this piece of this chip, and I want this on that piece of this chip, right? And it's still good at the end. Nachos are nachos. Well, that's what this is. It is a lot of sound brought together in a way that's just such a delight because it is a good payoff. And this is something I talk about on other noisy songs that we've had. I don't mind chaos as long as it's thematically appropriate. And I feel like here it is. These songs were constantly building towards something. Having it be these massive bombastic sections that are beyond comprehension is not where I thought they were going, but is a really cool way to do that because it's not just about the build up and the payoff, it's about how the things are built up. This song doesn't just instantly jump from purposefully placed to chaotic in a bar. It slowly kind of works its way towards there. We start off with things very meticulously placed, sections of the music carved out for this line and carved out for that rhythm. But as we add more and more instruments, there's a little bit more of this concept of stepping on each other's toes. There's too many instruments, especially once we add all three drummers and all three pianists and all 12, 13, 14 horn players, all three vocalists. There's a point where there's just not enough room for everybody to have their own ideas and not overlap. So that's where we have to bring in ideas of counterpoint. Well, if these two ideas have to go together, let's find a good way to do that. You know, let's make sure that when two notes are played together, they create a really nice chord. Or when these rhythms are, when these guys are playing something a little bit more complex rhythmically, these won't be. And then we'll trade off, right? You make these concessions to allow your melodies to exist simultaneously. But there is a point as we get closer to these where these concessions aren't made anymore and things start to feel a bit more chaotic, and there we have instruments clashing, we have rhythms clashing, we have things that just don't feel like that guiding hand is there anymore. And it's this slow removal of this control that really sells the payoff. What does all this mean though? And that I don't know. This is a very open-ended track. I feel like it's up for personal interpretation, as a lot of music is. It has lyrics. I feel those might point me in an authorial intent. And we'll check out the lyrics in a second. But this could literally be any sort of concept of control versus chaos and the battle between them, or learning how to exist with chaos Maybe you're a very controlling person and you start to allow things to just, you gotta let things be. And then they start getting chaotic. You're like, no, fix it. And then we like organize everything again. Or like, you go here, you go here, you go here. But it's health. You can't control everything. So you just gotta go hands off again. And you just gotta learn to be able to live with that of not controlling everything. And that's just like two things that I came up with off the top of my head. The idea of control versus chaos, uh, organization versus entropy. I mean, this is massive. This is a metaphor for so much. So I don't really have a strong connection to the song other than the overarching themes here. So it's going to be really interesting to check out the lyrics and see what in particular they might be aiming for, and see if the music does a good job of representing those lyrical themes. So let's dive into it. And I wish I could give you some insight. These are a bit cryptic, and there's not a lot. I'm just going to read it real quick. This is not a dream. This is an awakening and an entering, and a painful reminder. And after all, we are the astronauts that keep dreams beneath our fingertips, and astronauts within the whole universe, inside of the universe. When we enter it, we just need to enter it. So feel it all go. Let it all go. Let us all go. Underneath the water, it feels like inside a womb, and underneath the sand, it feels like inside a grave. Then I have experienced both life and death. And I feel like it's just as open ended as the music is. It has these very large ideas of dreams beneath our fingertips as being the astronauts going within the entire universe, of awakening from a dream, of experiencing both life and death metaphorically by being beneath the waves and the sand. But what does any of it mean? I can't make heads and tails of it. I mean, it fits the music in that manner. It has very minute concepts of let it go. It also has larger than life, grandiose concepts, and they're paired next to each other as if there's no difference between them, such as the music quickly shifts between the two styles that it goes through. I don't know. If you have any insight into it, if those lyrics made any sense to you, let me know down in the comments. You can also let me know about anything else, any other thoughts you have about this. If you enjoyed it, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on, you can put that down there too. These are my thoughts on Fire Orchestra. Enter Part 4. In the description box, there's a link for Linktree in there. It feels so weird to say I don't know what happened. Also, if you want to support me, here's some links. But yeah, you can find ways to support the channel. You can find my music. You can find links to the Discord server and so much more in there. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. That wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. We will continue on with Death Metal Week and check out another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.